Hi everyone, it's Andy here. Just before we start episode 3, I want to let you know that on the recording of this episode, we recorded it on Zoom, and Zac, who I'm speaking to, is in another brewery, and it's a bit noisy in the background, and there's a bit of interference, and there's a few things which make it not the perfect listening experience. So you have to bear with us on that. I think once you listen for a few minutes, you'll get used to it. So sorry the audio isn't perfect, but let's not let perfect be the enemy of progress. And what Zac has to say is really good stuff. So yeah, hopefully you get used to the slightly dodgy audio quality, but enjoy the episode. Here we go. Welcome to the third episode of Nat Bauer Brews. My name is Andy, and I am a home brewer and beer lover based here in Cardiff, in sunny Wales, in the UK. Nat Bauer Brews is the name of my tiny kitchen-based brewery. It's small, but the beer is good and plentiful. Judge me not on my size, as Yoda would say. The aim of this podcast is to have great conversations inspired by beer with people who are passionate about beer, and do all of this ideally over a beer. And I can already see from the video feed of my guest today that we are both doing that. So that is good. It is episode 3, and this is a big moment because we are speaking to our first microbrewery founder. My guest today is in Columbia, Tennessee. He is the COO of and head brewer for the brilliantly named Bad Idea Brewing Company. It's Zac Fox. Zac, how are you?
Doing very well, Andy. How are you?
Yeah, not bad at all. And thank you so much for joining me, because I know you're very busy, 18-hour days and all that kind of stuff.
Appreciate you having me.
Oh, no worries. It's my pleasure. Now, where are you? Where do we find you at the moment?
Today, I'm actually at Common Law Brewing. So it's in Spring Hill, Tennessee, 15 minutes away from Columbia. They're about 6-7 months old now, but they're a brewery we usually gravitate towards when we're up in this area. Having a really nice Schwartz beer of theirs on tap. It's drinking really well right now, especially as the season's changing. We're getting a little bit cooler weather here in Tennessee. So just seemed kind of apropos. Just a very traditional, German-style black lager. Has a little bit of a roasty note towards the end. Some of that chocolate really comes through. It's, kind of medium light bodied. It's just really excellent for a day like today where it's, 55, 60 degrees outside.
Now, black lager is an interesting one, because sometimes I tell people, oh, have you ever had a black lager? And they look at me like I've just said, have you ever been to a sunny nighttime? Like, they can't get their head around the fact that these two things can exist. So for anyone that hasn't come across a black lager before, what is it? How does it work?
So just the addition of kind of your roasted malts, your darker caramel malts, chocolate malt, coffee malt, things like that. You're finishing off with a lager yeast. So there are kind of those equivalencies. You can have a Baltic porter, which is regular porter, but it's been conditioned with lager yeast or fermented with lager yeast. There's all these different nuances you can put on having kind of that clean lager profile, but still having that roast and chocolate and caramel and things that you would typically associate with, some of your darker beers like porter, lager, barley wine, stuff like that.
Okay, let me tell you what I've chosen. I'm actually running low on homebrew at the moment, which is a bad situation that I need to sort out. But and as I've said in previous episodes, I'm so lazy with naming my beers that it's just letters now, combination of letters. Mm-hmm. So this is a KL, which is a keg lager. It's the first lager I've made for my new keg setup. I've got to say, it is tasting better by the month. Like, this one has sat in the fridge for a good 3 months now, and it is tasting super clean. So I'm actually very, very happy.
Nice. I know on the last time you cracked up in one of those, you were talking about had a little bit more hop forwardness. And
yeah.
So, just a little bit of time will settle some things like that, especially in a lager.
You are impressing me here with your knowledge of the podcast, given that you remember that I had one of these before on a previous episode, and that you remembered it as hop forward. You are the ideal guest. I'm honoured. Thank you. Now, we have to thank Micah Ward, our guest from episode 1, the man who has visited 120 microbreweries. And he mentioned your brewery as one of his favourites. And from what I can see online, I mean, I wish I was there having a beer with you in person. I wish you could give me a tour of your brewery. But what I can see online, I can see why it's one of his favourites. I mean, I know I'm judging from photos on the internet, but it just exudes kind of community, passion, creativity, and a good sense of humour too. So can you try and describe the brewery and the tap room to us, and its location and kind of what it's like?
Sure thing. I don't want to paint a grandiose picture because it would probably be a little bit underwhelming for most folks. We're in a 1,300 square foot space in a reclaimed building that used to be a railroad warehouse in the Arts District in Columbia. So building that was built in 1920 originally housed rail cars, and at one point they were a grocer's warehouse where they would unload cool and dry goods. And then it kind of fell into disrepair in like the 1970s until someone decided we were going to put in an arts building. And so it's very industrial, lots of concrete, lots of brick, metal. We've kind of kept with that aesthetic, but we are in an area that's kind of burgeoning. We're one of the fastest growing counties in Tennessee, Murray County is. And so we've got all these artisanal people that are moving in, whether it be musicians who are going to Nashville to try to find their big break, painters, sculptors, things like that. And they're kind of revitalizing this area that we're in. And so we've really had this focus on, staying true to the artistic side of what we do. And that's kind of reflected in some of the beers that we have. And then also to where we are in the South, industry meets art. So that's kind of our aesthetic.
That makes total sense, the way that you've described it. And look, the great thing about podcasting is for anyone listening, you'll probably have a chance to get on your phone or on your laptop as we're talking and just Google it. Just Google Bad Idea Brewing Company. If you go on the Facebook page, there's a whole gallery of photos, and one that I like is maybe taken from a bit above, and you can see the outside seating area. You can see the road going up with a big truck going up it. Kind of sets the scene. So yeah, no, it's kind of small but perfectly formed is how I would describe it, right?
Yeah. And we're a 3-barrel, so we're 93 gallons at a time. So we really don't need all the space that a large production facility that has a canning line has, a bottling line. Most of our stuff that we do is kegged to either be served in the tap room over our own bar, or it goes out into distribution to our county, surrounding counties, into bars, restaurants, pubs, things like that.
You seem to have a lot of capacity for taps. If you needed to have a lot of beers on at the same time, you could do it. There's one photo I saw where I was like looking at the panel behind the bar, and there are a lot of taps there.
Yeah, we do. We constantly rotate. Like I said, we're a 3-barrel brewery. I've worked, in large production facilities where you're doing 30 barrels, you're doing 15 barrels of the same beer all the time. And that just kind of bored me. And so when we started up, I always said we want to go small so we can be nimble, we can be agile, and we can just, experiment. Lots of bigger breweries, 3 barrels is their pilot system where they test out all of their new beer. And we really wanted to make that kind of our staple and say, well, we're just going to do 3 barrels because we're going to constantly rotate. So we don't have any flagship, those staple beers that other breweries might have. It's all constantly rotating.
I love that as a concept, and it really comes across in how people talk about the brewery. I'm judging from what Mike has said. That was the thing that he said like, this brewery never brews the same beer twice. And I was like, really? But now talking to you, that is obviously the case. We've got to talk about the name, because as soon as Mike has said it, that is the best name for a brewery ever. So take it away. What's the story?
We've kind of been working on building a brewery for the last 3 years preceding our opening, which was 3 years ago. So about 6 years ago, working with a business partner and just kind of testing the water, seeing if this is something that would be feasible. As part of our conversation, like so many things do when you're starting a small business, it comes down to money and what can you do? Are you going to have to seek out investors? Or are you going to have to look for grants or, small business loans, things like that? And we finally just kind of said, well, what if we do it with our own money? And so we kind of both emptied out our pockets and laid out what we had. And as we did that, my wife walked by and said, this is all a really bad idea. and there were a few more expletives that she used in that sentence, but that was the gist of it. And the name just kind of stuck because, it was fun, it was playful. And, there's always that motif of you mess something up and you just write it off to being a really bad idea.
There's something about someone saying that something's a bad idea that just makes you want to do it more, right?
Exactly.
How does she feel about it now?
She loves it. The last 3 years, we spent the first year kind of being owner-operator, being there every night that we were open, bartending, in between brewing, working other jobs. It was, really a labor of love. still is. She's handles all of our day-to-day taproom stuff, manages employees, things like that, but still loves it now. And so I don't think she thinks it's as bad of an idea as maybe from the outset.
Now, look, this I think is the really interesting thing, and the great thing about having you on the podcast is that starting and running your own microbrewery is a dream for a lot of people. You have done it. What is it actually like?
It's a lot of weeping and gnashing of teeth. There's a constant panic and trepidation. And I think it kind of varies from brewery to brewery on how people feel about the process, especially like, are you going small? Are you going larger where you're going to have to secure investment? Are you going even larger than that where you've got corporate backing? But for us, it was really initial planning plus preparation plus being your own contractor, being your own brewmaster, being your own architect. It's just managing so many balls that are up in the air, trying to keep them up there and keep juggling the entire time. It's a lot of work on the outset, especially here in America. State liquor laws and beer laws vary from state to state. So it's knowing your county or city ordinances, it's knowing your state ordinances for breweries, and then on top of that, navigating the federal level, which, before you can be a brewery in the United States, you have to go through the TTB, which license every winery, every distillery, every brewery in the United States. And so you get a lot of conflicting information, but at the end of the day, once you do your research and you kind of put all those things in line, you can start to navigate through the process of build out, the process of, actually getting all your equipment set up, then, brewing on top of that, and then finally getting open to the public.
I guess you would have known a lot of this stuff, that this was going to be the kind of thing you were going to have to deal with. But it sounds like even through getting involved in the process, more and more stuff came up. So, hats off to you for keeping going with it. And I think, sometimes I think you need someone from the outside to say, what you've created is amazing. And I can tell that by looking at it and from how other people talk about it. So, I hope you get those moments where you pour yourself a drink after hours and go, actually, this is pretty cool.
Yeah. There's been some surreal moments, especially like when you do that first keg delivery, or you see your first tap handle out in the wild in a pub or somewhere, or you see a sticker on a car or a t-shirt on somebody. I mean, we were in vacation in Florida, South Miami, and somebody had one of our tank tops on the beach. And brilliant. I didn't know this person from Adam. So it was surreal to see that out in the wild.
Did you go and have a chat and say, hey, that's my brewery?
No, I'm a little bit more introverted.
You know what? I tried to, because with this podcast, I know it's a tiny podcast, so I always try and do something in return for the people who agreed to come on the podcast. So I went on your website earlier today and I was trying to buy, a couple of t-shirts and a hoodie and stuff, and it wouldn't let me do it. I don't think it wants to send it to Cardiff, which I can understand. And I was pinching myself as to what the delivery charges might be.
Send me your address. I can probably figure out like TNT or one of those other carriers overseas that I'll deliver to you.
We'll sort something out. But yeah, I would like to buy some of your beers, but I don't think shipping a small amount of beer over from America is going to work. Who knows? Yeah. We'll look into it.
Yeah.
What I'm picking up from you is that you've still got the love for it. And I worked in media for a long time. And when I worked in music radio, I've got to be honest with you, having playlisted music piped into my ears for 8 hours a day, it actually ruined my love of music, which was the whole reason why I'd got into it in the first place. But I'm noticing that doesn't seem to happen with people who then go and work in beer. They seem to keep that love. So what's the secret?
It's really about seeing people, having a beer with someone, talking with someone, seeing them respond positively to a product that you've had a hand in creating, or, created all yourself, and knowing that your labor, there's a one-to-one payoff where I made this, someone next to me is enjoying it. Very few professionals and people in their, professional lives can say that.
Yeah, actually, I'd not thought of it that way. But brewing and having a microbrewery, you cut out a lot of the middlemen that exist in other industry. Like if you're a recording artist, like I know you get that connection when you play a live concert, but otherwise, you're sending your music out into the ether. You don't really know, is the label going to release that single, and then the radio going to play it, and are people going to like it, and all that stuff. Whereas you can brew a beer, stick it on a tap, and serve it to someone, and you see the smile on their face, and you have that conversation. It is a real connection, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, for sure. And then, I mean, of course, there's also the converse, aspect to that, where you can also stick a beer on tap that you 100% wholeheartedly believe in and love. And then somebody on Untapped, they'll say, this IPA tasted terrible. And you're like, well, that was a Pilsner. So,
so the joke's on you.
Yeah. Maybe you were misinformed.
Yeah. I mean, talking of Pilsners that don't taste like Pilsners or weren't meant to be Pilsners, one of the best things I love about home brewing is that some of my mistakes have turned out to be my best beers. Do you still get that even at the kind of microbrewery level? Do you still get things turning out not as expected?
I think there are a lot of variables that you control for a little bit better when you kind of make that step up to, brewing on a professional system where you've got dedicated glycol, you've got temperature control, you've got fail safes in place to eliminate some of those major pitfalls. But I mean, there's still happy accidents. We do a lot of experimental stuff. We use a lot of like sugary breakfast cereal. We use a lot of weird ingredients in the beers that we do. And so you don't always know exactly, if something's going to ferment all the way, if you're going to have some residual sugar left over, if you're also going to have some crazy off flavor or crazy flavor of some byproduct that's used in whatever sugary candy we use. There's still some happy accidents, but you kind of know going in, this is the range of, where these accidents could lead you. One of the important things for us, and it should be for every brewery, is if you have something, never try to put a Band-Aid over it. Just don't be afraid to put something down the drain.
Yeah.
Because, serving something great is what brings customers back. It makes people lifelong patrons and instills trust and, kind of this consumer provider relationship. And so as soon as you break that bond and you have something bad on tap that you said, well, maybe we can fix this, you've kind of eroded that trust. And, it's better just to put $400 or $500 of product down the drain rather than lose out on the segment of people that could come in your tap room and be lifelong customers.
I know what you're saying, and I think that although it must really frustrate you and sadden you to pour a batch away, I respect the kind of levels that you're maintaining.
At this point, I mean, I've been doing this 15 years. Luckily, knock on wood, it's only happened 3 times in our existence. So about once a year, like the very first beer that we brewed out of our brewery, I put down the drain. Then a year later, we got hops from a different distributor that weren't packaged correctly. They oxidized super quickly. And it kind of gave out this oxidized off flavor, cardboardy, with a little bit of like residual sweetness that we didn't want in our IPA. That one went down the drain. And then we've had one batch that just never fermented out all the way. Nothing would work getting it going again. So that's another one that made it down. But you just kind of know that there's always going to be things like that could happen. And better to err on the side of caution and just say, well, I wouldn't sit down and have a full pint of this, or, my best friend wouldn't want it. So I'm not going to serve it.
If you poured your first batch away, that must have been heartbreaking.
It was one of those things, like everything that could go wrong went wrong. When you get a new brew system, you will do they call it a water brew day. So you'll just fill it with water. You'll run through every process that you have. After you do that water brew day, you say, well, this is the little nuances, little tweaks that you need to do. Well, we did our water brew day. Everything went fine. But then when we actually had beer in, it was, we had an element that went out on us because we had a breaker on our electrical panel fail. Then we had to kind of have this really long boil. And then our condenser stack open. It was reverse threaded for some reason that we didn't notice from the get-go. And it was just a terrible day, and had some trouble getting our yeast propagated fully. And so the beer was okay. Like, I probably would have drank it, but it wasn't worth serving, especially on your opening day, because we launched with some really, really great beers, and people kind of started taking notice when we did, even though we only had, I think we had 5 or 6 on tap instead of 8 or 10. But what we had, people really, really responded well to. So it was worth, having kind of a smaller launch, but definitely one that had more impact.
And I bet it was nice when you then did your second brew and it all worked out fine. That must have been a big
Exactly.
relief.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're going to have to accept the blame of the entire world for one of the worst things that ever happened to this planet, I'm afraid, Zach, which is that you started the pandemic because you brewed a barley wine.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite beer styles. And we brewed that beer and it came out in late February of 2020. And, it ushered in Pandora's box of terrible, terrible things. And so I take full responsibility. And that's kind of how we named our next barley wine and talked about it. This is the first barley wine we've attempted. So you're hearing it here first on That Far Brews. If there's some other type of global pandemic, there's nuclear war, there's planes falling out of the sky, it's all on me, and I'm sorry for that.
Who knew that this tiny brewery had such a control over global events? Now, barley wine. Talk to me about barley wine, because that is something that I would love to brew, and it intrigues me. I still haven't even tasted one yet. So,
wow,
what's it like to brew, and what's it like to drink?
Barley wine brew days are long days, especially when you're on a smaller brew system. The whole reason they're called barley wine is because you're producing a higher alcohol content beer, getting up there in the double digits, kind of like you would a wine. It's essentially just all made out of barley. So hence barley wine. They are long, arduous days, long mash out, long boil. Typically, we do an American style barley wine. Really good examples of that style would be like Sierra Nevada's Bigfoot barley wine, where you've got a lot of back bitterness. They use all Cascade or Centennial hops. That's kind of what we do with ours. But then you get this really nice blend of resinous pine in the background, but then it's overtaken by all like caramel, almost chocolate covered caramel flavor. I don't know if Rolo candies or something in the UK. But yeah. Well, it's like having a Rolo or a Werther's candy with your beer, and it's just really nice. And you get all the best characteristics of your caramel malts. You get all the best characteristics of kind of your hops that you're using on the back end, and then you get just a little bit of we usually typically pitch like an American ale yeast for our barley wine, usually like our Chico strain, which is a Western California style, made popular by Sierra Nevada yeast strain, and it ferments out really well. It's just a really good, balanced, malty, caramelly beer, especially for the autumn and for the winter. I don't think it gets any better than having a barley wine.
My whole brewing journey started with stumbling across a copy of How to Brew by John Palmer, isn't it? And
John Palmer, yeah.
Yeah. In his recipe for barley wine, he says to be enjoyed by a fire, discussing the merits of, and I can never say this word, metallurgy? I don't know. Because he's like an engineer, and he's like, I want to sip barley wine and talk about metal.
Metallurgy.
I just thought, wow, if it's going to make me talk about metal, it must be very strong. But you have to sip these gently, right?
This is completely unrelated, but there was a guy, I believe he's from the UK, who wrote a great book about 6 years ago, but it was all about, how far we've come as just a global civilization and returning to a time when you did things just with your own two hands. And I know this is a long story, but it's great because it involves metallurgy. And he went through this process. He said, what is the most innocuous thing that you can buy at a big box store, whether you're overseas, whether you're in America, whether you're in South America? He decided a toaster. He wanted to make a toaster from scratch. And so he documented this whole process of, like going and picking out ore and going back, making like alloy and tin and doing all this metallurgist type stuff with these professionals. And he made this handmade toaster that didn't caught on fire. That's usually what I associate when I hear metallurgy. So,
which reminds me of another random story, which there was a guy here in the UK who decided to make a beer purely from 1 acre of land that he owned. So everything came from that. So he grew his own grain, he grew his own hops, he harvested the rainwater, and then he used the natural yeast in the air to brew the beer. And I thought What a great concept.
Yeah, it doesn't get much more hyper local than that.
Exactly. There you go. That's even just talking about barley wine has taken us into bizarre areas. So there you go. It's clearly a magical brew. Seeing that you're doing so many new brews all the time, what's your creative process for coming up with your next few brews?
I like to kid around with people that I usually have like 4 or 5 beers and then have my wife drop me off at the grocery store and I walk through the cereal aisle. But I think there is kind of like, I grew up in a certain era and I have all these fond childhood memories of certain sweet treats or certain cereal, certain tastes and textures and things kind of like that appeal to my culinary side, and just using beer as a vehicle to replicate some of those memories. And it's really kind of like a childhood fever dream when I'm on the brew deck sometimes. I've been in this industry for 15 years and, you know, I just kind of crave something pure and something that's been unadulterated or free of lactose, free of powdered ice cream or whatever else we're using other times. And so we do some traditional things that kind of counteract for, you know, our purist friends that come in and say, I just want a beer that tastes like beer. Well, you know, we have that too. Just kind of that pursuit of doing everything true to style or just true to memory.
So is it like one new recipe a week or one a few weeks? Or how does it work? What's the rhythm?
Well, in 3 years, we've done like 227 unique beers. We've repeated, I think, 5 different beers. There's a beer that we do every year. So the day my grandfather died, I did a Pilsner beer because the only beer I ever saw him drink, and just through pictures, because, you know, he had been abstinent from alcohol for, God, I don't know, 50 years or something, was Miller Lite. And so I said, well, I'm going to do a Pilsner because, I mean, we never got to drink together. And I brewed that beer. And so I brew it every year. And, you know, it's just a really great Pilsner that I really enjoy. So there's inspiration like that.
That's a lovely story about your grandfather. I really like that. Good on you for doing that. Nice to raise a glass. I think that's actually one of the special things about beer, and, you know, for others it's wine or whatever, but actually raising a glass to someone and there is a special memory, and even better if you've brewed that kind of in his memory. I think that's fantastic.
That's one of the few ones that comes back every year. Like right now, we have a Cinnamon Toast Crunch brown ale. So it's 36 pounds of Cinnamon Toast Crunch cereal. So little sugary cinnamon squares.
I'd love to try that.
It's one that, you know, we came out of the gate with. People have continuously hounded me, and I usually tell them, like, every time you ask me, I'm going to put it back another month. And so we're finally to the point where no one's asked me for about a year, so we brought it back.
So obviously you've got this cereal aisle keeps kind of calling you back for recipe ingredients. And you mentioned earlier that there's a few times when the ingredients have done things that you weren't quite expecting. Is there one where it turned out quite different?
Coffee is always a wild card because I don't know how the craft coffee scene is in the UK, but in America, we've kind of developed this very high-end coffee. I'm going to use the word snobbery, but I don't mean it offensive, but, you know, you get these coffee folks that are describing coffee in certain ways, like, oh, you know, this tastes like dragon fruit and apricot. And I'm like, well, it's been years since I've had a dragon fruit, so I really don't know what the hell you're talking about. It kind of tastes like coffee to me. So we've done a few coffee beers. Like, we usually age it on whole bean. That way you're not getting the acidity. You're getting more of the wash. You're getting some of that external flavor from the bean. We usually do like a 24 to 36 hour steep post fermentation right before we head it to the bright tank to carbonate. We've done some beers that we expected, like these dark chocolate, caramelly, chocolate covered orange notes from, because that's what we were sold by the coffee company, or, you know, the guy peddling the coffee. And then they turn out like super floral. And it's always a crapshoot with coffee because I think people just write words on a box.
You may as well be talking to the marketing person rather than the person who actually made it. Yeah,
pretty much. Yeah.
We're running out of time, which is a shame because I could talk beer with you for a long time, but thank you so much. And we've gone into some strange areas. We've gone into metallurgy and stuff, which was good. But I think what I was expecting, which you've really done, is bringing to life what it's like to really run a microbrewery. And thanks for all of that. I mean, if there's anyone out there listening that is kind of on the verge of thinking, oh, I'd love to do that, what would be your advice, or what would you say to them?
It would be to seek out someone that's done it, because the beer community, it's a growing profession, but there's still this element of smallness where it's community, and people will open their books to you. They will open their process to you. Don't be afraid to reach out. If anyone ever wants to contact me, and I'm an open book on how we started, the processes that are involved, equipment we use, process all of this is not company secrets. It's just people trying to make their way through something that they're passionate about, that they love. And part of this is paying it forward and sharing that with others.
Okay, at this point, I have to let you, the listener, in on a bit of a secret, which is we do these recordings of the podcast on Zoom. I'm not paying for Zoom, so it's 40 minutes maximum, which is a good thing because it means that we don't over-record, and means we keep the interviews tight, and we end up with an episode that's well under 40 minutes. But it does mean that sometimes when you risk asking a quite deep question at the end, which I did, and they give a very good long answer, then you do just go over your time. So that's why Zac cut off at the end there, and apologies to Zac for that, and apologies to everyone else for me just being a bit of a skinflint. But that's what I am. My thanks to Zac. He was just a fantastic guest, and it was fascinating to hear all the background to Bad Idea Brewing Company, and I would encourage you to go and have a look at their website and their Facebook page so you can get a feel for what kind of brewery it is. Zac's story is very inspirational, and the way he looks at beer and the way he looks at the brewery, just very positive. Really happy to speak to him. So that is the end of episode 3. You'll be glad to know that we do have a guest lined up for future episodes, but I don't know what order we'll be doing it in, so I won't tell you about that yet. But it is a relief to have an episode where it isn't just me talking to myself. Thank you to everyone who's listening. The numbers are growing, which is lovely. If you want to recommend the podcast to anyone, please do. Like, subscribe, all that kind of usual stuff. I need to go and make some more homebrew. That's what I need to do, because I am running out of homebrew to drink on this podcast while I speak to my guests. Anyway, have a great life for the time period that passes between this episode and the next. It's the Nat Val Brews podcast, and this is Andy signing off.